mind. We're uncaged.
Welcome to Topple Uncaged. I'm Steve Topple and you're locked on to the UK's hottest politics and music podcast. Each week I bring you the rawest takes on the big stories making the news, always joined by a very special guest. Then I pleasure your mind, body and soul with the freshest, most banging international music going.
Uncaged.
Entertainment alongside education, and that we bring to the nation. A Maccabee
and soul of Banton in a combination, bringing information for generation after generation. What we say? We're there on a mission, entertainment is the prize.
Exposing all their behaviors, lies. A lyrical assault upon injustice in this time.
Dropping bars of knowledge on a baseline.
Edutainment is the key. Positive message to the people with lyrics and melody.
My goodness, my guest on this week's show is quite literally a UK reggae legend. Having been active since the 1980s, he is a producer, selector, MC, but moreover, he is a supremely talented artist, not only musically, but lyrically as well. He has just released his first album in 7 years, and boom! It is absolutely stunning. I mean, musically, it's absolutely brilliant, but lyrically, it is so profound, and the themes and the messages contained within it, and the way he puts it across is second to none, in my opinion. It's a really, really, really exciting release. I think it's going to blow up, and I'm very excited to be able to welcome him to the podcast for the first time. It is the incredible Solo. Banton is here. Solo, thank you so much for coming on. I am genuinely excited to talk to you because the album is fire.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Good, thanks. Thank you for your kind words as well. I enjoyed that.
I haven't even started yet. So we'll get into the album in a few minutes, but I just want to touch on festival season because it's kind of wrapping up now, isn't it, really? You've sort of been across here, there and everywhere performing fairly extensively this year. How's it been for you compared to other years? Is the vibe different? Has anything changed? What's performing this summer been like?
Do you know what? I kind of stepped back a little bit,
I saw you doing a few gigs over Instagram, though. I saw you sort of dotted here, there.
No, I was still doing a bit, but it hasn't been as mad as it has been in previous years. But that was because I purposely took a step back, like last year, just to get the album finished and stuff like that. So when you take a step back, after like 6 months to a year, it starts reflecting that you're taking a step back, But it was cool because I had so much to do with getting the album finished and, shooting videos and doing stuff like that. I really wouldn't have had the time to be as busy as I have been in previous years. So it all worked out perfectly, But yeah, it was a good summer in that way. So I managed to do everything I needed to do as well as get some shows in. So it was blessed. It was really good.
Excellent, nice balance then, to be honest. Do you find, I'm always interested with sort of acts that perform across continents, as it were. Do you get a difference between UK and European audience? Because obviously, I mean, the sort of reggae scene in Europe is pretty huge at the minute, and it's kind of, it's not as prominent in the UK as it once was, maybe in some respects, and sort of more the sort of overtly prominent as it used to be. Is there a difference between audiences, do you think?
Yeah, there is a difference. There's quite a big difference, actually. I think you find in the UK nowadays, a dedicated reggae audience can be quite small in numbers. So usually usually UK events are more of a mixture of genres, whereas abroad, you would have a strictly reggae event and there'd be 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people there. Do you know what I mean? So in that way there, it can be different. I think that the crowd is more, I don't want to say intense, but more, it's just more of a reggae crowd, like wholesome, like reggae crowd. Like you'll have 100% of a reggae crowd. The whole night will be reggae, and that's all it is, Whereas, like I say, in the UK, you're going to get a bit more mixture in the events, don't you? You might get a drum and bass DJ at the end or blah, blah. Do you know what I mean? So
are they sort of more tuned in Europe, do you think? Is that what it is?
To a degree, because what you're going to get when you get a dedicated reggae crowd, they're going to be more, I don't want to say more, they're more how can I don't want to sound disrespectful to people who's not that way, but more.
I know what you're trying to say.
They're more like-minded. They're more conscious of what's going on. Do you understand what I mean? So, like I say, like if you've got an event that's got drum and bass DJs on it, or you've got you're going to get some people there that's not necessarily into the message. Whereas when you get 100% reggae crowd, 80-90% of them are into the message, and not just how loud the bass line is. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no.
And that's the difference that you get. Still, that's the difference that you get. And also, if I could just elaborate a bit, though, and also because their English isn't their first language, they pay attention a lot more because they're trying to make sure they understand everything that's being said. So they're concentrating a lot more as well. You know what I mean? So the attention span is a lot higher. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. No, but,
sense,
no, you summed it up. Brilliant. No, I think you're spot on. I think do you know what? I think there's also elements of the fact that sort of, how can I put it? More underground music, more sort of conscious music, whether it be reggae, whether it be, even there's elements of grime which can be quite conscious, but there's been more commercialisation as well in this country. I think has a lot to do with it. And as you say, people aren't necessarily so. We're an extremely corporate country, really,
yes.
The UK, and I think that plays a part in people's listening tastes, I suppose. But I don't know. No, really interesting insights. I want to get on to old Ragamuffin, which is of course your brand new album. I'll lavish praise on it in a few minutes, Solo, and I'll save that for a minute. But it is, of course, your first studio album in 7 years. What brought you to the decision to release a new project now? What spurred you on to do something brand new?
Do you know what? It was a couple of years ago. I think I don't know. I must have got something like a Facebook memory, or Kris Kemist must have got something, and he's like, we've spoken. He's like, do you realise it's been 5 years since Higher Levels? And I was like, wow. I think it might be time to do another one. And that's how the conversation started about let's do another album. But then the conversation got deeper in how we wanted to go about it, and we've definitely gone about it in a different way to the previous two.
That's really interesting you say that. I want to pick up on that later and make a mental note of that. What was it like going back into the studio then properly after so many years? How did it feel? Was it good? Was it different? Do you sort of had your approach changed at all?
Well, to go back into the studio to be working on a big project is a different mental span as opposed to just going in there to record a one-off single, which I've done loads of recording over the 7 years in between the two of singles and stuff like that. But to go and say, yeah, we're going to do an album, like you have a different mindset, and there's a lot more that goes into it. Whereas like when you're doing singles, I've done a lot of singles. So I wasn't necessarily involved in so much as the rhythm track, and I say, yeah, I like that one, and then I'll write to that one. Do you know what I mean? Whereas this process here, I'm there from the start, like the very first hi-hat, I'm there sort of thing, So yeah, that's the difference in that preparation, really. And I love it.
It must be quite consuming as a person to do something like that.
Very much so. Very, very much so. It does it. I do anyway. I can't speak for everybody, but sometimes I long for the break. Just don't want to do music. I don't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? Sometimes I long for the break. I long for a distraction. Some people think that their distraction is a bad thing. I'm like, no, it's a great thing. You need to walk away because something as well. You spend all night in the studio. It sounds great at 3 o'clock in the morning because you've been there for 6 hours. You press stop and you walk away and come back to it 2 days later. You're like, this is awful. So you have to walk away and come back. It will always sound good when you're a little bit high, and you know what I mean. You'd be like listening to the same thing 4 hours. It's going to sound great, isn't it?
Do you know what? It's the same thing as being a writer, actually. You can sit there until sort of, like, you summed it up brilliantly. You sit there till the early hours in the morning and you think, yeah, I've really nailed this. It's really, really good. And you sort of have a couple of hours sleep and come back to it like, for fuck's sake, what have I done? And you start from
a little bit try, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a bit like that.
Absolutely. But I mean, obviously, the end product, Old Raggamuffin, came out absolutely brilliantly. I mean, in some respects, it is your very recognisable style in terms of that it's very, very dubby. There's elements of sort of reggae musical devices in there. The bubble pattern is present sometimes. There's a one drop on some of the tracks. Also, there's sort of a gorgeous elements of it's kind of soul, but it's kind of for me listening to it anyway. It's more influenced by calypso. The backing vocals, the arrangement of them is superb. Really, really, really beautiful. Work there as well. So sound-wise, it's very, very much you. I mean, there's some standout tracks for me musically, and then we'll talk about the lyricism of it in a little while. But the standout tracks for me, I mean, Take Aim is absolutely brilliant. The bubble pattern is sort of only delicately going on in the background. The bass is on this kind of almost funky soul riff, and then you drop a Hammond organ in, which just sort of sets it off perfectly. And with these gorgeous gospel-esque backing vocals, it's a wonderful package, a wonderful amalgamation of kind of styles and arrangements, and I think it works brilliantly. Edutainment I absolutely love for numerous reasons. The message is just so good. I was like, I heard edutainment, and I heard universal language, and I was just sort of cheering, going, finally, someone's written properly about how important music is. But we'll go on to that in a bit. Dragfoot as well was another great track. There's sort of elements of ska horns in there, and musically, it was a real kind of light and shade in terms of that the instrumentation is wonderful throughout it. You get the instruments sort of going up to crescendos and then sort of drawing right back again. It's a beautifully composed and beautifully performed track from all the musicians on it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Wiccan This Trending, another excellent track. And overall, like I say, the sound is very you, but it still sounds really fresh. It's absolutely on point, especially in terms of all the different styles and the instrumentation and the arrangements, and of course Kris, I mean, is absolutely fantastic. He's been your long time collaborator for quite a while now. I've been chatting to him a fair bit over the past few days. Great guy, and the production and the sort of engineering and mastering on it is absolutely superb. Really, really, really top quality work. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal project, and as I say, we'll get into the lyrical content and the themes behind it in a little while. But this eclecticism of using different styles, and you have over the years essentially created, like I said, a very recognisable sound musically. Where did that come from originally, and how has it developed? Was it a reflection of your own tastes? Is it things you've heard? Is it the people you work with? Where's the sort of dubby, soul-y, rootsy kind of vibe? Where does it come from?
Do you know, like when we said we were going to do the album, I said that I really wanted to do me. Hence the title became Old Raggamuffin, because I just really wanted to do me. Over the years, I love all style of music. When I said I was a music addict, I love everything, and I mean, like, people say that, but I really love everything. My first job on a sound system was playing soul music. You know, my first radio show I'd done, I was playing soul music on Rare Group. You know, so I do love everything. So it's been nice over the years to experiment and touch some dubstepy kind of things and blah blah blah. But I really just wanted this album to be like me, of things that have influenced me, because I haven't always come out in the past. So all of those sort of things just come from what's influenced me growing up. I reflected on the music that really influenced me coming up, you know, and drew for those strokes. So those things that you're hearing is just that, really.
Yeah, the soul really comes through on it. I mean, as I said, the vocal arrangement's absolutely fantastic. Really, really strong work in there, and with a lot of the instrumentation as well. Absolutely shines through. Time for your first break, and if you want to go and grab yourself a tea, coffee, or any other kind of refreshment, do so now, because me and Solo will be back with more chat in just a few seconds. But it's your lyricism, which of course is completely on point as always. It's something I've been sort of reading about you and reading other people's sort of opinions, which I don't always do. I'm not a fan of music journalists generally. I have to say they like to they have to pigeonhole people and box people in, and this person's that or this person's that or whatever. But I've been reading sort of other people's takes on your work, and everyone, of course, says it's your lyricism and your way of almost poetically putting points across. And Old Raggamuffin does that in spades. I mean, again, a couple of tracks, Sleepwalking, this brilliant sort of analysis and take on, I mean, what I got from it and my way of expressing what it means is essentially how the system is effectively turning us into zombies and we're all walking towards our own destruction, effectively, basically, while eating ourselves up at the same time. That's my analogy of the song. Edutainment, as I said, is absolutely brilliant about how music truly is the kind of most potent way almost of addressing the ills in society, and how it should be used as a tool for both education and entertainment, hence edutainment. There's Wickedness Trending, which is this excellent narrative about how people in power use and manipulate narratives and propaganda, and of course use within the title and within the track in the realms of modern day phenomenon of social media, and how they essentially use the power and propaganda to manipulate the populace. You've then got First World Problems again. It really, it felt slightly tongue-in-cheek in some respects, because you break down very well all the sort of stresses that we think we have in life, and what you take from it as a listener is, well, all these sort of stresses are absolute nonsense, really, and it's just all bollocks, and it's just like the stresses are almost imposed by the system, and they're stresses of the system's creation. That's the sort of the message that I felt when listening to that, and I sort of thought, yeah, why am I stressing about that I can't get this, or I'm late?
Yeah,
to this?
Why are we stressing about?
Exactly.
Why are we stressing? Because we've got to wait 20 minutes for the table in the restaurant. You know why?
That was the line where I was like, yeah, why am I worrying? Why am I? But in all seriousness, it's kind of like I said, it was tongue in cheek, but a line like that then also brings it right back home about, well, we're stressing about having to wait for an expensive meal when there are millions and millions and millions and millions into billions of people in this country who don't know if they're getting a meal tomorrow or not. And that's kind of the point. And then the First World Problems, the title encapsulates it perfectly. Universal Language, again, another brilliant track, and there was an excellent line in it which I'm going to pick up on later. But Universal Language, brilliant track, again back to the importance of reggae and how it should and could be used as a vessel almost for spreading the correct message throughout the world to the populace. Awkward, another fantastic track. I mean, again, lyrically, you're on fire with that. Just a brilliant. It's a very serious track, but it also kind of. What I took from it was, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I might be completely false-footed with this, but I almost took it as a swipe and a message to the kind of, how can I put it politely, Guardian reading liberals who think they're all kind of, it's all equality and multiculturalism and, oh, yes. But when they actually hear the truth, they don't actually, it makes them extremely uncomfortable. It's just that kind of awkward.
That's exactly what it is.
Hey! That's what I got. I imagined a middle-class white Guardian reading person sitting there thinking how wonderfully multicultural they are, and then actually when you break it down to them, they don't really like it at all. But good. I'm glad we're on the same page with that track. And Rolling Stone, which ended off the
Say that
again. Rolling Stone, which finished off the album. Beautiful track lyrically. It's about how I said again in an interpretation I got from the feeling was how you as an artist, but also it's a lesson for all of us in life, how we kind of get swept along in almost day-to-day life, in your terms, being an artist and everything that encompasses and how you get swept along with that. But really, what is really important is family. And when you break it down again, everything else is kind of peripheral, if you like, to that family unit. And it's sort of an homage to almost that. But also you say within the track, and as we all should do, you do count your blessings for everything that has been given to you and everything that has come your way in life, and the opportunities to tread the path you're on. But ultimately it comes back down to family. And I thought it was a very, very fitting and it was a very poignant way to end the album. I mean, it's just the content is just absolutely fantastic. I love it to bits, and you are funny, but sort of deadly on point in equal measure throughout it, which of course is quite often the best way to get across the message you want to. I mean, since you released Higher Levels, wasn't it, 7 years ago? Since you released that, I mean, has your worldview changed? Have you got more? What's the word? I don't want to say more focused on what you're wanting to say. Has that changed? Has your worldview sort of enhanced and expanded since then? Because I mean, it is just so on point and so relevant. Every single track is relevant to today. It's a complete picture of you and your message. I mean, has that evolved since you did Higher Levels, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Okay. I don't think my views necessarily. I think I've learned more as you do in time. You're going to learn more about certain things, and sometimes we can be a bit hasty on judgment, so I think I've learned more, but I don't think my view has changed that much. If anything, I think I've just learned to express it better, and also, if anything, say it without remorse, say it with pride. Sometimes, I think I might have been guilty of it in the past, of trying to say something, trying to get a message across, but at the same time not trying to offend somebody. Those days are over. I think that just comes with age, really. You know what I mean? Like, the truth is the truth, isn't it? Really, like, the truth is the truth, and there's only one way to say it. And you say the truth, you know what I mean? So I think if anything has changed, it's just that the non-apologetic approach. I think my approach is I still think you learn best via humor. Not necessarily like, there's always a time to be serious, but I just feel, I've always felt this from when I was at school, the teachers who got through to me, and the teachers who I got on well with and done better in their lessons was ones who I could have a laugh with, and ones who I spoke to. I think no one wants to hear someone just wagging their finger at them. I don't think you learn. I think you could easily shut off from that, But I think if you could do it tongue-in-cheek, or you could have a tongue-in-cheek moment and then go back to seriousness, I think the message gets through. That's always worked with my children. And it's always worked with me. So that's my approach, really.
And it works brilliantly, as I say. I mean, especially on tracks like Awkward, it just so cleverly done. And I do want to touch on that track specifically in a little while. But yeah, no, I think, do you know what? I think it's also listening to Higher Levels and then listening to Old Raggamuffin. You say that you're sort of more unapologetic, which I agree. I think it's a good thing. I think we've had... I mean, in terms of us as a society, we, under the wonderful Tony Blair, became extremely PC, and everything was, well, you can't say that, or you need to dress it up like this, or you must put a sugar coating on this, and we've lost that ability to be direct and say what needs to be said, and I think that's part of the reason why we're in this mess we're in, actually, because people tend to skirt around the issues now, as opposed to getting straight to the point, which just ultimately ends up confusing situations. But I think also this sort of unapologeticness, it's also reflected in your delivery and your performance. There seems to be, looking at Higher Levels and then looking at Old Raggamuffin, you can hear it in your performance. It seems it seems almost more self-assured, and I think that is then you maybe being more unapologetic. Your delivery and your performance has become a lot more rounded, and it is more direct. The way you transfer the message to the listener seems to be a lot more honed, almost. Is that a fair reflection, or is that me hearing things?
No. I think it's a fair reflection, and probably what you don't know. Or maybe what you haven't captured. Another reason for it being that way is Old Raggamuffin. This album is the first album that we've done that is solely produced by Kris Kemist. So we said we was going to do an album, and we was going to do it. There was going to be no other producers on there. So you have to remember, with Higher Levels and even with Walk Like Rasta, there were tracks on there that was not produced by Kris. So at the time of writing those tracks, I was in a different mind space from track number 1 to track number 5. Whereas with Old Raggamuffin, the mindset is exactly the same, because we was doing this project. So every time it came to writing for this project, the mindset would be exactly the same. So I think that is also what you can hear. I think yeah. That makes sense.
That is absolutely fascinating. I'm intrigued by that, but it makes perfect sense. If there's only two main sort of protagonists on a project, then it's going to be more honed, because you're both on the same sort of in the same zone, and you're completely in tune with one another. That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, how was it working with just one sort of producer on an entire project? What was that like?
It was perfect. It was perfect. I'm going to find it very difficult to go and do it any other way. I don't think I'll ever do it any other way, regardless of who I'm doing the album with. If I was to do an album with another producer and another label, then that's the way that I'm going to do it. I think that's the way you get the best out of it, I mean, I thought High Levels was a great album. But yeah, there's different producers on there. I mean, the only thing what we done for Higher Levels was, when we chose other tracks from other producers, I revoiced them again, so Kris could mix all of the vocals, so we'd have that continuity in the vocals, But sitting down and saying, we're writing all of this album together, is perfect. I'm never going to do it any other way, especially now that you've said that as well. I love that. You just cemented that now with that statement what you just made there. Definitely.
Happy to be of service. Excellent.
Thank you.
This is the halfway point of the interview, and I wanted to play you one of the tracks off Old Raggamuffin. Absolutely fantastic album, as I keep waxing lyrical about with Solo. This is one of my favourite tracks. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Musically, it is fascinating. Absolutely top quality production arrangement. One of these standout tracks on the album. This is the fantastic Take Aim. Solo Banton, Take Aim. Check this out.
I see them take aim. Yes, it's not the same campaign. We extinguish the eternal flame, but I don't feel shame. I ride on the rootsman train. I know you wanna drive a switch lane. You cannot separate the wind from the flute. They said them love the tree, but all the poison the root. Them never sow no seed, yet one reap all the fruit. This your madman, all I try and take the dumpling on the soup. Hear me now, my youth. Yes, I never have you upon a wrong route. Need to make a U-turn and face the truth. This you can't dilute. Two kick from me, Gideon. I set them shit because them thought they get me militant. I see them take aim. Say them have a new campaign. What was out to Rastafari name? This a lion can't tame. Roman I go chop up the main chancellor. See how you again and again. I see them take aim. Yes, it's not the same campaign. We extinguish the eternal flame, but I don't feel shame. I ride on the roots, maintain. I know you wanna drive a switch lane. I can't forget the emperor, cause he's the fuel in the car that make it go. The power source to the energy that flows. Heist the flag, make we turn back all the enemies and foes who approach with woes. I see them lurking in the shadows, but who they working for, I make a guess, but only John knows. I feel them animosity against me liberty. Kemist said, come make we expose those who want to take aim. I said them have a new campaign. But me sometimes ask the far right name. This a lion can't tame. No, me not gonna chop off remain. Chancellor, I see how you gain and again. I see them take aim. Yes, it's on the same campaign. We extinguish the eternal flame. But I don't feel shame. I ride on the roots, man, train. I know you wanna drive a switch lane. Back up the minimum sights. I know just who they are and what's the plan, but man, I fight. They want me done with.
Knowing now that's the reality of it, you can definitely hear it. There was something that I couldn't exactly put my finger on. Now I know what it is. So it absolutely shows. It absolutely shows. So yeah, there we go.
Another. Can I just give another quick bit of information here? Because you mentioned Take Aim earlier, and he was talking about the musicianship on Take Aim. Take Aim was the first track we recorded for the album. So. And we were so happy with it. We was like, okay, that's the benchmark. Everything that comes after that, if it doesn't reach that benchmark there, it gets scrapped. You know what I mean? As simple as that. Yeah. So yeah.
Fascinating. My ear is not too bad then. I'm quite happy with that. It is one of these standout tracks. I'd say Dragfoot as well is especially good, but from the point of view of the musical performances within it. But Take Aim and Dragfoot are musically just stunning performances. Everyone involved in both those tracks is absolutely fantastic. I want to hone in on a couple of tracks because there's fascinating and absolutely searing messages throughout the album, but there are a couple of tracks and specific lines I sort of want to pick up on and sort of then make broader talking points out of lines in a couple of tracks. So first off, I want to start with universal language. As I said, it's about the power of reggae and how it should and could speak to everyone. There's a brilliant line in it where you say, we need the real thing and not the imitation reggae. Fascinating line, and really, as someone who speaks to artists from all across the world, week in, week out, I literally 2 hours ago, we're recording this on Wednesday, 9th of October. 2 hours ago, I was interviewing him, Marley, in Miami. Last week, I had Indubious on from Oregon. I also had Busy Signal on from New York. I've got Spragga Benz coming on this week as well. So I speak to all sorts of artists, all sorts of different genres, but all kind of based around reggae or dancehall. And as I say, you said in the song, we need the real thing and not the imitation reggae. I mean, do you think... And I could name some names, and I might do. Do you think we're sort of getting back to a stage where essentially sort of reggae roots and also sort of dancehall and dub, really everything that sort of is based around those genres of music? Are we getting back to the sort of commercialisation and corporatisation, if you like, of it again? I mean, I was quite young in the 90s, but I do remember there was a big kind of reggae it turned into quite a corporate sound in some respects, where it was very popular. Record labels sort of pushed it even when artists weren't reggae artists. Are we going back to that again, do you think? Is that kind of what you were getting at, or is it just...
I think we are going back to that. And the answer to the question is, I do think it's going back to that. And I don't... And the problem with going back to that is, I think everybody has the right to be creative, and I love creativity, you know? And whatever sound you come up with, then that's your sound. And I respect that. And I even appreciate that, you know, especially if you're paying homage to something. However, the strength, especially when I'm talking about in universal language, when I say the strength that reggae has to touch the four corners of the globe in that way, if you water it down, it's not going to be as strong as that. It's not going to do that service if you're making it weaker. You know, you buy a car and you start putting water in the tank. It's not going to do the service that you want it to do. It's going to struggle to drive that 100 miles because you put water in there, and it doesn't take water. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So for it to be a universal language, it needs to be the original substance. It needs to be as original as it possibly can be. Yeah, because I think that I think the problem that you're having now, if like, don't know if problem is the right word, but I think what you could get is you can get other genres classed and branded and advertised as reggae, as roots, and it's not. And then somebody who's just coming into reggae are listening to something, thinking that they are listening to something that's 100% reggae, and it's not. You listen. Unfortunately, it might still be very nice. Don't get me wrong, but it's 70%. No, you're drinking concentrated orange juice instead of non-concentrated. You know.
I think it's a very good analogy, and I think it's actually an extremely good point. But is that? If I suppose blame isn't the right word really, but I suppose responsibility then maybe is the fairer word. Does the responsibility for that fall at the feet of artists, or does it fall at the feet of the people promoting the artists and writing about the artists, from journalists to the sort of A&R people to the PR people within record labels? Who is responsible for that? Because
I think everyone's responsible for that. I think artists are responsible for that. And I include myself. Remember, I said to you that I spent many years doing recording experimental reggae and experimental stuff. You know. And I could have easily continued doing that. I could have done a whole album like that. But I think the world needs to hear some real roots rock reggae. So I think everyone's responsible for that. I think people who know the real people who know the original thing and ignore it to give you a carbon copy are at fault. I think that's a dangerous thing, and I've come across that, and I've seen that firsthand. Whether it be a promoter, whether it be a producer, whatever, I've seen people. I've had people ask me to water down what I'm saying. You understand what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
What's that all about? But then you still want to brand it and advertise it as roots reggae or just reggae. You understand what I mean? And that's not right. I don't mind you. If you want to sell a diluted version, and advertise it as a diluted version, and then do your thing in it. But don't dilute it and say it's the original thing. I know, it's as simple as that. And I've seen people, I've witnessed people do that firsthand. And I don't think that's right. Like I say, I respect everybody's creativity, and if that's what you're doing, then it's great. But tell people that's what you're doing. Don't try and market it as something else when you know it's not. When you know the message isn't true, you know it's not.
I think it's a very good point, and I broadly agree with you. I mean, if you look at, I'm trying to think of a good. I think as long as you're being authentic and honest with the listener about what you're doing, then, as you say, it's not anyone's place to say, well, that's not creative, or that's not expressive, or that's not authentic to you as an artist. That's fine. But yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting point, actually. I think it's a very important point that, well, sell it as such, then don't try and branch it under the umbrella of roots or reggae, I suppose.
And it's not, it's not that. Don't do that, Yeah.
The industry drives that as well. The best example for me, and I sat there with my head in my hands, was obviously Shaggy and Sting winning the fucking reggae Grammy last year. I was like, well, firstly, neither of them I would class as reggae. Secondly, I don't know what tantric shit Sting's been performing on Shaggy, but that's another story. And that was kind of the pinnacle of watering down for me. I mean, obviously, they're up against Protégé, who was nominated, who, again, he's part of the revival movement, which is something slightly different to Roots, but the revival movement and artists within it are quite straightforward about what they do. I mean, musically and lyrically, Protégé's Amount of Time is an exceptionally good album. But, of course, Shaggy, for fuck's sake, really. Anyway.
I'm laughing as well because my daughter's in the room with me while we're doing it, and she hates the album with a real zest,
Yeah. Tell her respect.
we was listening. I had it on in the car, yeah, because I said I really got to listen to this. I haven't really sat down and listened to it, and I was listening to it, and after song, he was just like, "Dad, really? Another one? Like we don't need to hear anymore. We can hear what it is, please." Like, you know. So she's throwing her hands up in the air, saying, "Thank God someone else has said it." So she agreed with me very much. So
excellent, good. I think we sound like we get on very well. But it's true, and it's the way that the industry, for the sake of dollar, like you say, I mean, it's not even watering it down. It's essentially misselling something, really, isn't it? It's not watering down. It's packaging something up to be something it completely isn't, and it's all very awkward. And speaking of awkward, Solo, I want to talk about that track as well. As I said, I mean, it's a fascinating listen, because half of you wants to laugh and half of you wants to kind of hang your head in shame, really. You strike this wonderful balance between humour and an extremely serious message. And there's this brilliant line in there which is about Churchill turning in his grave if he could see Harry and Meghan, obviously how they are now, and getting married. But as I said earlier, it's a very sort of pointed nod, in my opinion, sort of the liberal Guardian reading middle class white people who think they're sort of open minded and multicultural when they're not really. I mean, even though we're sat in 2019, you make a very relevant point about Churchill, and of course it's one that's glossed over all the time. Essentially, that he was a massive fucking nasty racist, but we know him in World War II, etc., which is a complete sort of washing of history clean. But we're sat in 2019. I mean, do you think we've still got this within society, almost it's colonial hangover, if you like, where we've put this sheen on top of sort of ethnicity, like it's a problem that's almost been solved, as it were, when actually we're still within the underbelly of the system and society. There's still inherent racism from both the system and then the way it filters down into society more broadly. Is it still as much a problem as it always has been, do you think? Do you think things have improved at all?
It is still very much a massive problem, and I think this is a deep question. You know, we could be talking about this for a long time.
We can talk about it as long as you want.
Yeah, I think it is still a very massive problem. It's a really big problem. I think when you talk about a sheen and trying to cover it over, I think that's what the ideology behind being PC was.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's what the ideology, when they came out with this PC thing, I think that was the ideology, that they could stop people from saying things that would expose wrongdoings in the hierarchy. Yeah, it's as simple as that. Yeah, and then what has backfired now, which is clear to see, is you can see it coming out. You can see it coming out in every day. I mean, look, everything, obviously all of these things going on with Brexit and stuff like that. Some of the things that have been said now and that was said in the campaign, it's just blatant racism. And if not racism, is this trying to get back this old ideology of the empire that's above everybody else. No, nobody's saying. I haven't heard anybody say a logical, factual reason why they want to leave. All I've heard them say is, we want to get back our blue passports. Or, it's ridiculous. I was listening to the radio today and they're saying that Twitter account, is it Leave the EU Twitter account or something like that? Yeah. They done this tweet with a picture of Angela Merkel and saying, we didn't fight in 2 world wars to be told what to do by a crowd. I mean, is that not the most unintelligent? How stupid is that? How dumb is that? Where's the intelligence in that? Where's the reasoning in that? Really? So, yeah, I do think it still exists. I think it's clear to see that it still exists. And the institutionalized thing is still there. It's still there, And the reality is, people say that there's freedom of speech, but they will cringe if someone says they're proud to be black, or if someone says they're proud to be Italian, or if they're proud to be Turkish, they cringe. No one wants to mention, So, and that's what makes me laugh as well. They'd be quick to say that they're proud of winning World War One and World War Two. Will they ever mention all of the Indian soldiers that was in the front line during World War One and World War Two? Would they ever mention the Pakistani soldiers? Would they ever mention all of the soldiers that came over from the Caribbean that were promised citizenship if they came over to fight? And then when they did come over to fight after the war, they wasn't given that citizenship? Will anybody mention that? No. So they mention Churchill and they'd be all happy, we won the war, we beat the Krauts, blah, blah, blah. They won't mention that it was a multicultural army that defeated, that won the battle. That doesn't come into account. So it does exist. The hypocrisy of it is ridiculous.
I think you've just to, sorry, interrupt you, but the hypocrisy is kind of a key point in this because, and that was exactly what I was saying, that essentially the PC era kind of glossed over all of this. It was also a very good divide and conquer tactic almost, because it split us up into identity. So, okay, you're black, you're a member of the LGBT community, you're from this country, you're this, you're that, you're the other, you're the other. It essentially intentionally divided us up. But the hypocrisy is the main thing, because of course what we saw in the Blair PC era was that, well, no, you can't say this and you can't say that and you can't say this, but we can go and bomb the fuck out of Iraq and drop depleted uranium on loads of brown people, and Obama can drop more bombs in 2016 on the Middle East than any other US president in history, but you have to be PC.
But you can't mention it. So you're not allowed to say all these things. Meanwhile, we can enforce them by policy and we can make laws by them by policy. But then no one can have the conversation because you're governed by this so-called politically correct thing, And it just made every conversation messy. So because obviously there was a conversation to be had about the movement of people and immigration. Obviously, there was a conversation that needed to be had. There's a conversation that needed to be had, whether it was putting strains on the system or whatever, But it became difficult to have that conversation because of PC world. But but then that allowed it to make it very easy to turn that conversation into a racist rant, and nobody would say a word about it. That's what PC done. And when you talk about exactly what it done. It stopped you having the true conversation about what it was about, but then it allowed people to have racist rants. We don't want no foreigners. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. How is that correct? It's very political. It's not correct, though, is it?
No, exactly.
So even the phrase is a brainwashing thing. Even the phrase is an enigma. Politically correct. When have you ever found anything that's political to be correct in this day and age, in recent days? You know what I mean? So even the phrase itself is mind bending.
I think it's a brilliant take on it, yeah. And I'm thinking in those terms, of course, absolutely. If you need to have a crack break, this is your last opportunity to do so, because me and Solo will be back with the final part of this absolutely storming interview in just a few seconds. But I mean, the whole thing with sort of political correctness, it was always intentional anyway to get us to this point where essentially governments could have the higher moral ground and essentially we're free to do what they want. But the rest of us, no, well, we can't say this. And you're quite right about the immigration thing. Whether you agree with immigration, whether you disagree with immigration, whether your view is more nuanced, whatever your take on it is, it was essentially because of political correctness. It eventually, when the debate had to be had about it, it was so toxic that the arguments were immediately, as you say, it turned into an inherently racist topic, and everything we see now in terms of Brexit and the narratives and the language and the positioning of people on it are all a result of the sort of late 90s and the noughties, this sort of degradation of conversation, and this sort of essentially, as I said, sort of dividing us up and telling us we couldn't say these things and say that and say the other. We're now at the end game of all that, and we've reaped what we sowed ultimately.
Exactly, because then what you do, like you say, when you divide people, and you mask it as the greater good, like you said, no one's fighting together. So one community is fighting just for that particular right, and another community is fighting for another right. You know, when instead of both these communities should be fighting for both of those points together, but you've divided them now. You know, under this blanket of PC, and you can't say this, you can't say that, and that's exactly all they've done. It's just easy. It's plain to see. I think it's plain to see anyway. You know.
I think it's plain to see, and I've been saying it for years, and I quite often get, because I'm not a music journalist by trade. I'm a political journalist by trade. That's what I actually do. And I've had this opinion, and I've been writing about it and saying it on television for years. And I often get frowned at, but that's essentially what it was. And again, part of the end game we've now seen with that is that it was dividing sort of the working classes up almost into identity groups, and of course the end result of that is now there's this brilliant grime artist. He's called Marcy Phonics, and he's a friend of mine. He does really strong sort of political grime music, and he was debating a black Tory MP on Channel 4 News, a guy called Kwasi Kwarteng, Tory MP, black, very middle class, very educated. And what Marcy Phonics was...
I know of him very well, yes.
You do know of him very well, excellent. And what Marcy Phonics was essentially saying was that we're now at a point where it's no longer about ethnicity, because Kwasi Kwarteng no longer represents the people Marcy Phonics represents. It's now, it should be about class now, because when you can have a black man like Kwasi Kwarteng in the Tory party and in power, it's no longer about ethnicity. It is about what social class you are in, essentially.
Yes, definitely, and what and what social arse you're prepared to kiss.
That's brilliant. I'm writing that down. I'm fucking remembering that one. But there is, and so all of that, PC, blah blah blah, Brexit, it has brought us to this point essentially, and I think we're in an intentional mess. But I mean, awkward, as I said, sums a lot of that up absolutely brilliantly, and I mean the whole album is superb. Edutainment, I just want to touch on Edutainment because it's such a clever track in terms of again saying that the music should be used as a tool of education, effectively. I mean, your whole album, in some respects, is an education, if whether you're initiated or not. It is, because the sort of swathe of subjects and topics you deal with throughout it is quite remarkable. I mean, when you reflect on Old Raggamuffin, did the themes and what you want to talk about, did it just sort of naturally happen, or was there any sort of planning and construction in terms of, right, okay, well I want to address sort of inherent colonialism and how racism is still prevalent on this track. I want to address how music and specifically reggae can sort of help change the ills in society. Was it a construct, or did it just come out working with Kris that this is what I want to talk about on this track?
You know, when me and Kris work together, it's a really natural process, and so we do let things arrive how they arrive naturally, but at the same time we are very topical, and we do keep an eye on what's going on within society, and so these conversations will come up very naturally, you know. So there's no, we didn't make a list and we say, all right, we're going to make a song that says this, we're going to make a song that says that, that doesn't happen. That kind of process doesn't happen, you know. But very much we could be in the studio and having a conversation about something, and you know, the conversation develops, and when we just say, oh, did you see what happened here? Did you see when this happened? And blah blah. And then that conversation could then influence the natural vibe in the studio of the song that comes out. If that makes sense.
No, makes absolute sense.
So now we never sit down and say we're going to make a song that says this or we're going to make a song that says that. But whatever's going on at the time that we're making a song, it will naturally evolve into what's going on. You know. So even with Awkward, something distinctly happened when I was listening to that track, and I was just trying to catch a vibe on it. You know, just got it playing. I can't remember what happened, but a few things must have happened within that week of me concentrating on that song for me to write Awkward. Do you know what I mean?
No, absolutely, and do you know what it shows actually? Because the whole project, looking at it in its entirety, none of it comes across as forced or it comes across very natural and very, very, very authentic, which is of course the point of the music. There's one track again which sort of raised my interest a little bit, which was "Smile Every Day." Which was again a brilliant track, lovely, and all about positivity in some respects. I mean, how can I package this question up? The world's going to hell in a handcart. We've got political chaos in the US, political chaos in this country, political chaos in Europe, the sort of far right, quite prominent in many, many places, ecological and climate catastrophe looming, police getting more aggressive than ever, the state becoming more authoritarian than ever. Is it still possible to smile every day and sort of maintain an outlook that, well, things are going to get better? Do you think, I know you must believe it, but I mean, for me, I sometimes wonder if we've gone now too far as a species with what we've done, not only to ourselves, but to the planet, to possibly pull it back. Do you think that you can still smile every day and that there is still hope for us?
The thing that what I believe it is that it will make it easier I think it makes it easier to accomplish your mission or your task if you could smile while you're doing it. That's the point that I'm trying to make when I say smile every day. So your task might be a very serious task. Your mission could be a very serious mission, you know, but I think it's easier to complete such a hard task if the person that you're doing the task with or within yourself, you can smile about something while you're doing it, you know. So for example, the Extinction Rebellion.
Are you reading my mind? Because I literally was about to say, well, the Extinction Rebellion is a perfect example.
I mean, for the protesters to be there for X amount of days or doing what they're doing, like what gets them through is they must be happy within each other, within themselves. They must be smiling within themselves, you know, to get them through such a hard task of sleeping in the tent, you know, in Trafalgar Square or whatever. You understand what I mean? It has to make it easier for them if they can do it with a laugh. If they could park a boat outside Parliament Square, you know, that if you check it, there is an element of humour in it that gives them the strength to get through. And laughter is a very powerful thing. The strength of it is very powerful, you know, because anger is quite destructive to yourself, you know, and so therefore, if you're doing something in anger, you might well still be completing the task, but you're doing it with harming yourself at the same time. But if you can do that with laughter, you're actually, you know, you don't have to damage yourself to get the task done, get the same task done. Excuse me. Yeah, does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, and I think it's spot on, because the thing is, it took me years to get to the point, sort of as a person, where my initial reaction is no longer just to scream and shout and lash out. And I think all you do with that is you're just putting more anger and negative energy out into the world, but you also, as you quite rightly sum up, you're harming yourself, and the people you're angry at, you can bet your bottom dollar they ain't giving out as much energy on you as you are out on them being angry.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of energy to be angry as well. So, you know, in theory, if you want to look at it in as physics, you know, surely your momentum, you're going to be able to do further. You're going to have more energy if you preserve energy on the way, you know. So if you're making that march, let's say we're on a march. If you're making that march and you're happy, you're preserving more energy with your happiness, so you can march further. If you do that angrily, you're only going to be able to march a mile because you're going to be knackered after a mile. You know, you do that with laughter, you can march 10 miles. You know what I mean? So I believe you could get further and you could complete more if you can smile every day. You know?
I think that's a very good mantra for everyone to have. And of course, I mean, obviously it goes without question, I suppose, that music, and especially roots reggae, is central to this, isn't it? I always think that if only everyone could listen to a bit of roots or a bit of reggae, then the world would be a much better place, because I think it is one of the keys, if we are to move forward as a society, one of the key elements of that is the music specifically. I mean, because it's so powerful, and it just completely flips your worldview on so many things. I mean, do you agree? Is the music key to how we can move forward as a species?
Oh, definitely. Like, we need to recognize the power of music. I think is underestimated or ignored too often. It is probably the most powerful, if not it is, it's one of the most powerful forces in advertisement, you know, and in just motivation, you know. We need to remember, you know, when in Vietnam, for example, the government would make the troops listen to like really aggressive, hardcore, like techno, but like all with negative sounds and stuff, you know, to spur them up to go and die, basically, to go and fight somebody who they don't even know and kill these people who they don't even know, you know. So we need to respect the power that music has, and take response. And so then, when you're lucky enough to wield that power as musicians, as artists, as DJs, when you're lucky enough to wield that power, you have to take responsibility of the power that you're wielding. It's as simple as that. And people, we just need to recognize that and admit it and stop pretending there's no power in music, because everyone seems to walk around and say, "Oh, it's got nothing to do with the music." If I turn around and say something about, well, if you're listening to negative music, it's it's only music. It's got nothing to do with the music. It has everything to do with the music. It has everything to do with it. I'll just think of an example, and it's just gone out of my head now. But yes, that's what I was going to say to you. When I was playing the sound system, and when I was playing the sound system full time, we used to do a regular night in a nightclub. You know, we used to play in there every Thursday night. You know, and you know, all sorts of music used to play. We'd be playing everything, playing reggae, dancehall, hip hop, R&B, like the lot. You know. And this club, when we got the residency in there, the club had been going for a while, and then we got the residency in there. And they had a problem in this club that there was always fights. At kicking out time, nobody would be leaving, and then they'd always be fighting outside come 2 o'clock, you know. It was a midweek sort of a Thursday night, you know. And it was a real problem, and the club was going to lose its license over it. So once we got the residence, we spoke to the promoter, and we came up with a policy. So the club finished at 2 o'clock. So we came up with a policy. As soon as it got to 1:30, we wouldn't be playing no hip hop. We wouldn't be playing no dancehall, you know, and everything we played would be loving. So usually we'd just end the night on slow jams, R&B, some Jodeci and all of this kind of, and these kind of things. You understand what I mean? Or we'd be playing like some lovers rock reggae, you know? The fighting was gone within 2 weeks. There was no more fighting at the end of the night. So how can you tell me music does not influence people? You're sending people home on a different, with a different mentality. So basically we'd play slow jam and lovers rock reggae for the last half an hour, all of these guys that was normally fighting, they're not interested in it now. They're trying to talk to the girl that they was trying to dance with for the last half an hour. You know what I mean? Everyone's on this loving vibe. You know what I mean? All the mates, they're all hugging their mates, or they're trying to talk to these girls. You know, no one's on this aggressive. We want to fight each other, because what DJs was doing was playing the hardest songs in the last half an hour, and then everyone's hyped up and listening to this stuff, and so testosterone is flying all over the place, and everybody just wants to fight each other, and that's how powerful music is. It's powerful. That's why do you think they have music in adverts all the time? If it wasn't powerful, they wouldn't have music in adverts. And just to note, how many adverts do you hear with some reggae sounding music in the background? It's a lot, isn't it, mate?
Do you know what? If I did a study, the results would be fascinating. Yeah, very true. I do have one more question, actually, because a couple of people on my Twitter account, on my social media, have asked me this, Solo Banton. What's up with the Ford Capri on the cover of? Is it like some Del Boy thing going on? Or?
Well, I love
My
Del Boy,
Capri gear.
I do love that program, by the way. It's the greatest program ever made, ever. You know, but just like what I was saying to you earlier, when we said we were going to do this album, I really wanted it to come from me, and what I'm about, and the influences I had growing up. So when we're talking about growing up and being an old ragamuffin, Ford Capri was the car. I was just in love with this car, you know. And I don't even know how we got the vision of it, but we said that, you know, if we're gonna if the title track is gonna be Old Raggamuffin, then I want a Ford Capri. I really want to find a Ford Capri, because it just helps me get into character, really, just to sum up the character, basically. So that's why it's just me. It just comes from me. That's all.
I think that story is an absolutely brilliant way to sum up everything you do, that music can literally change how people think and feel. And I mean, Old Raggamuffin does that in absolute spades. It will stand as
Sorry, you know what? Sorry to interrupt you. Have you ever seen the experiment that they've done with playing music to water?
No.
Okay, so there's an experiment. I think you must be able to find it on YouTube. And well, it's not even a video. You can see it in just a picture form. But basically, they have like a dish of water, like a laboratory dish of water under a microscope. Yeah, and I don't know what music they chose, but one picture says this is playing negative music to the water, and this is playing positive music. Yeah, so in the negative picture, all the cells are just all over the place. Just looks like a mess, you know. Whereas with the positive one, they're all uniformed, like it's like a uniform picture. It looks like a picture of beauty, you know. Whereas like the negative one, they're just all over the place in chaos, you know. And then so when you look at that, and then you remember, as humans, how much of us is water? 80%, 90%.
Yeah.
Like, come on, like how much more proof do you need? It's amazing. You have to try and look for it. Try and have a look for it if you can find it, you know.
I will take your word for it, and when we finish this interview, I will go off and play Old Raggamuffin to my bottle of mineral water and see what effect it has on it. Because I'm sure it will be unifying these cells and molecules within it. Brilliant, brilliant stories, and as I said, they perfectly sum up everything that you and the album is about. I mean, it's fantastic. It will stand solo as, for me, one of the albums of the year. It's an absolutely storming piece of work. All respect to you for it, and also all respect to Kris for his work on it as well, and all the musicians involved. Seminal work from you, I have to say, and seminal interview. It's been absolutely brilliant to be able to chat with you. I could actually literally go on for hours, but I do have to at some point stop the podcast, because otherwise I don't know where it would end. But it's been brilliant to speak to you. Absolutely fascinating. You're a lovely guy, and I really, really enjoyed that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast for the first time of many, hopefully.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be back again. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. I always talk too much, so I'm happy to talk. We could do this every week if you want.
that was around hour, so that was perfect. But yeah, I'd quite happily do this every week. We might have to have a think about that. For the minute,
thank you for having me, though. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
My absolute pleasure. For the minute, Solo Banton, thank you.
Blessed love. Thanks.
How amazing is solo Banton? My goodness, that was an overarching interview. Absolutely fantastic chatting to him. Really, 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 really enjoyed it. And politically, oh yes, he's on my page, absolutely. Brilliant, and I cannot recommend the album Old Raggamuffin enough. All the links to be able to download it are, of course, in the show notes. Get yourself a copy now. It is on point. And here is the title track off the album. This is, again, fantastic, brilliant kind of summing up musically of what he's all about, and also about him lyrically as a person as well. Absolutely fantastic. This is incredible solo Banton with Old Raggamuffin. Solo Banton, Old Raggamuffin. Check this out.
Old Ragamuffin, I'm winner too. I'm pump Semana. Old Ragamuffin, we don't set the trend. I will first bust this style, man. Old Ragamuffin, I'm winner too. I'm Semana. We don't set the trend. I will first bust the style with how me step, how me stride, how me move is like me a glide. When me dance, you think of Michael Jackson, I bust a moon slide. So me cool like the birds, me and swagger like the trees, and I see mention trees. No, me want to blow this smoke straight from the east to the west. But for watch I wanna dress, Ragamuffin and we in a tight trousers. For the careful down the swings, a man I keep it masculine. So for the God he made me, when I go turn me back on him, but anyhow, from subject from the Ragamuffin talk out from a youth, them know them couldn't put no padlock on the mouth. Modern mentality with the old school liberty. Never sell them soul for popularity, but not weak a man. Old Ragamuffin, I'm winner too. I'm pump Semana. Old Ragamuffin, we don't set the trend. I will first bust this style, man. Old Ragamuffin, I'm winner too. I'm Semana. Old Ragamuffin, we don't set the trend. I will first bust the style. Want to big up on the ragga, them will come before me. Peter Bob, Bonnie Malcolm and Muhammad Ali, to name a few who never changed their policy in an interview. Stood by their convictions, never afraid for speak the truth. But nowadays, everyone's about face. And I want to move the goalposts and I'm trying to rearrange. Ragamuffin tell me force, and Ragamuffin tell him again. For them lane and for them lane and for me lane, it's not the same commander. Old Ragamuffin, winner too. I'm pump Semana. Old Ragamuffin, we don't set the trend. I will first bust this time, man.
And that's it. Another absolutely fantastic episode of Topple Uncaged is done. I'd like to thank my fantastic guest this week, the incredible Solo Banton. You can't follow him on Twitter, but he is on Instagram at Solo Banton. As always, behind the scenes, thank you to the love of my life, the gorgeous Nicola Jeffrey. Follow her on Twitter, it's at Nicola C. Jeffrey. My man behind the booth, sound engineer Gav Pause. Follow him on Twitter, it's at Pause with AC Radio. And my in-house singer, it's Ray Star Music. Follow her on Twitter, it's at Ray_Star113. Thank you to the Canary for uncaging me. I will see you again soon.
Uncaged.